I heard moaning from our bedroom and opened the door to see my fiancée straddling him, hair messed, sheets twisted around them. She didn't even get off him. She just said, "Can you give us a minute?" My hand started shaking and I was not supposed to be home yet. That detail mattered later because everything that followed existed only because a meeting ended early and my phone battery died in the elevator. I walked down the hallway carrying my jacket in one hand, already irritated about small things that felt stupid in hindsight, like the flickering light near our door and the neighbor's music bleeding through the walls. I unlocked the apartment quietly out of habit, stepped inside, and immediately noticed the smell. The air was warmer than usual, heavier, and the bedroom door was half closed. I heard the sound before my brain named it. At first it registered as noise without meaning, then rhythm, then recognition. I moved down the hallway without slowing, because my body refused to negotiate with the idea forming in my head. When I pushed the door open, I saw Marina on top of a man I recognized instantly. Victor Qley, his hands gripping her hips, her hair loose and tangled, the sheets twisted into a mess that looked nothing like sleep. She looked straight at me and did not move. Her face showed annoyance rather than fear, as if I had interrupted a phone call. She told me to give them a minute. That sentence landed harder than the scene itself. My hands started shaking, not because I was about to cry, but because my body had shifted into something sharp and focused that I had never felt before. Victor looked at me and smiled. That was the moment the room changed. I grabbed his arm and pulled him off the bed, not violently enough to hurt him, but hard enough to make it clear this was over. Marina shouted, not in panic, but in outrage, as if I had crossed a line she believed belonged to her. I dragged Victor into the living room while he scrambled for his pants, knocking over a chair in the process. The noise carried through the thin walls, and I knew the neighbors could hear everything. I did not ask questions. I did not demand explanations. I told Victor to leave, immediately, and when he hesitated, I opened the front door and threw his shoes into the hallway. He protested, trying to sound reasonable, saying this was between me and Marina, as if he had not just been inside my bed. I shoved him out and slammed the door before he could finish his sentence. Marina came out of the bedroom wrapped in a blanket, yelling that I had embarrassed her, that I was overreacting, that this was not how adults handled things. I locked the door and told her to sit down. She refused. She said she had planned to tell me eventually, that I was supposed to understand this had been coming, that relationships changed. I realized then she had rehearsed this conversation, just not this timing. I called her parents on speaker without warning her. When her mother answered, Marina froze. I told them exactly what had happened, where she was, and who she was with. Marina tried to interrupt, talking over me, changing details mid-sentence, calling me unstable. Her father asked her directly if it was true. She avoided answering. That silence did more damage than anything I said. There was banging on the door before the call ended. Victor had come back, this time with 2 friends, all of them loud and confident in the way people get when they believe intimidation will solve things. One of them shouted Marina's name through the door. I told them to leave. They did not. A neighbor across the hall opened his door, saw the situation, and stepped back inside without a word. Someone called the police. Marina started pacing, suddenly aware that this was spiraling beyond her control. She accused me of setting her up, of trying to ruin her life. I told her she had done that herself. When the police arrived, Victor and his friends tried to explain the situation as a misunderstanding, but Marina's version kept shifting. She said I had been aggressive. She said she felt threatened. She said Victor was just a friend who came to check on her. None of those stories matched the scene the officers could see behind her, or the half-dressed man standing in the hallway. Statements were taken. Voices lowered. Neighbors watched from behind doors. I kept my hands visible and my voice steady. Marina kept changing tactics, alternating between tears and anger, trying to pull sympathy from anyone who would listen. One officer separated us and asked if there had been prior incidents. Marina hesitated too long before answering no. After they left, the apartment felt smaller, like the walls had shifted inward. Marina sat on the couch and told me this did not have to turn into a war. She said we could still control the narrative if we were smart. That was when I understood the real danger. She was already thinking about how to rewrite this, how to position herself as the victim, how to make me the unstable one who walked in and exploded. I told her to pack a bag and leave. She laughed and said it was her home too. I reminded her that the lease was in my name and that staying would only make things worse for her. She stared at me, realizing for the first time that the confidence she had shown in the bedroom did not extend into real consequences. She left an hour later, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. My phone lit up immediately with messages from mutual friends, from people asking what happened, from people already hearing different versions of the story. I did not respond. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the twisted sheets, the physical evidence of a decision that had been made long before today. Before midnight, I received a message from someone I barely knew, warning me that Marina was telling people I had lost control and scared her. That was the moment I stopped reacting and started moving. This was no longer about heartbreak or betrayal. This was about stopping a lie before it became permanent. The morning after Marina left, the apartment felt like a place that had been evacuated. Not quiet in a peaceful way, but hollow, like sound had nowhere to settle. I did not sit with it. I did not replay scenes. I showered, changed, and walked outside before the building could trap me in my own head. My phone kept vibrating. I silenced it and decided the order of things. Marina had already begun shaping a version of events that painted me as dangerous. Waiting would let that version harden. I went straight to where lies travel fastest. People. The first stop was Sabine Cross. She lived 5 blocks away and always made a show of being loyal to Marina while keeping one foot outside any real responsibility. She opened the door already tense, like she had been expecting me. I did not raise my voice or demand explanations. I told her I knew she had helped Marina create cover stories, that she had repeated them, and that if she wanted to stay out of what came next, she needed to stop speaking immediately. Sabine tried to play neutral, saying relationships were complicated and everyone made mistakes. I reminded her that neutrality disappears when you actively help someone lie. Her expression shifted. Fear has a way of clarifying things. She promised nothing, which told me everything I needed to know. From there, I went to Marina's workplace. I did not storm in or make a scene in the lobby. I waited until the weekly team meeting began, walked in calmly, and asked if Marina was available for a minute. She was seated at the table, composed, already wearing the version of herself she planned to present to the world. When she saw me, something flashed across her face that looked like calculation adjusting in real time. I spoke clearly and briefly. I said I was there because Marina had begun telling people I was unstable after being caught cheating in our home. I said I would not accept being framed as a threat to protect her reputation. The room went still. Marina interrupted, accusing me of harassment. I asked her to explain why the stories she told coworkers did not match what the police had documented the night before. She tried to redirect, claiming personal matters should stay private. Someone at the table asked what police she meant. Marina's composure cracked for half a second, just long enough. Her supervisor ended the meeting early. Marina followed me into the hallway, furious now, not careful. She said I was ruining her career. I told her she had already tried to ruin my life, and this was me refusing to stand still. That was the last conversation we had where she believed she still had leverage. The retaliation came quickly. By afternoon, messages circulated claiming I had threatened Marina, that she feared for her safety. I was not surprised. What had surprised me was how sloppy it was. Different people received different versions. In one, I had shouted and broken furniture. In another, I had grabbed her arm. In a third, Victor had bravely intervened to protect her. These stories did not align, and people noticed. I went to Victor next. He was at a public gathering with his family, the kind of setting where he could not control the audience. I waited until he saw me before speaking, so he could not pretend I ambushed him. I stated what happened in simple terms, without emotion. I said I walked in on him in my bed with my fiancée, that he returned with friends to intimidate us, and that police had responded. Victor denied parts reflexively, but denial falls apart when spoken too loudly in front of people who were never supposed to hear the truth. His mother asked him to step aside. His sister looked at Marina's messages on her phone and frowned. Victor left early. I stayed just long enough for the silence to do its work. By evening, the social terrain had shifted. People were no longer asking me what happened. They were asking Marina why her story kept changing. That night she filed a complaint. I learned about it from a knock on my door. 2 officers stood there, professional, reserved. Marina claimed she felt unsafe and that my behavior had escalated. The timing was transparent. I did not argue. I explained my movements that day, named witnesses, and pointed out that Marina had left the apartment voluntarily after the incident. The officers noted everything and left without further action. It was enough to tell Marina that fear could still be a weapon, even if it did not land cleanly. I did not wait for the next move. I went to the building management office the following morning and requested access to common area incident logs. Not recordings, not files, just logs. Dates, times, reports. Marina had already tried to involve authority. That meant structure mattered now. Patterns mattered. Sabine called me that afternoon. Her voice was tight. She said Marina was panicking, that she had not expected people to compare notes, that she thought controlling the narrative would be easier. Sabine wanted reassurance that she would not be pulled into anything. I told her the truth plainly. Anyone who kept lying would eventually be exposed by their own contradictions. Sabine hung up quickly. Victor disappeared from communication. His silence told me he was calculating losses, deciding whether Marina was worth continued involvement. People like Victor do not stay when attention turns costly. Marina began reaching out indirectly, through friends, through vague messages about resolving things privately. I ignored them. The escalation came from an unexpected direction. Marina showed up at my building late in the evening, not to talk, but to provoke. She shouted in the courtyard about how I had embarrassed her, how I had turned people against her. Neighbors watched from balconies. Someone recorded it. When I asked her to leave, she accused me of threatening her again, loudly, clearly hoping witnesses would hear only fragments. Instead, witnesses heard the whole thing. Security intervened. Marina left screaming that she would make sure everyone knew what kind of man I was. By the time she reached the street, her performance had already been uploaded and shared. Not by me, by someone tired of being dragged into a lie. That was when the balance shifted decisively. Marina's problem was not the affair anymore. It was momentum. Every aggressive move she made created another inconsistency. Every attempt to control the story produced more witnesses who did not remember things the way she needed them to. Victor never reappeared. Sabine stopped answering her calls. Marina's parents asked her to stop contacting them until she could explain herself without changing details mid-sentence. I went back to the apartment late that night and slept for the first time since everything began. Not peacefully, but without panic. I knew the next phase would be uglier. Marina would not retreat quietly. She had invested too much in being right. But she had made a mistake early, one she could not undo. She had treated the moment I opened that bedroom door as if it were a small inconvenience she could manage. That arrogance pushed her to move too fast, to lie too broadly, to underestimate how quickly people notice when reality does not line up. Marina did not slow down after the courtyard incident. She accelerated. That was the mistake that finally broke everything she had been trying to hold together. By the third day, her anger had turned sharp and unfocused. She stopped trying to sound reasonable and started trying to sound convincing. Those are not the same thing. Convincing requires consistency. Anger only requires volume. She sent messages to people I barely knew, warning them to stay away from me. She told coworkers I was stalking her. She told mutual friends that I was manipulating witnesses. Every version leaned harder than the last, and every version contradicted something she had already said. I did not chase her statements. I did not respond publicly. I let the friction do its work. The turning point came at the apartment building. Marina returned again, this time during the afternoon, when people were coming and going. She demanded to be let inside to retrieve items she claimed I was withholding. I stood in the lobby with the building manager present and told her calmly that she had already taken everything she asked for and that further visits needed to be scheduled formally. Marina raised her voice immediately, accusing me of control, of intimidation, of locking her out of her own life. Someone asked her why she kept coming back if she was afraid. She did not answer that question. She changed subjects instead, which only drew more attention. The building manager reminded her that security logs showed her previous outburst and that future incidents would be documented. Marina laughed bitterly and said documentation could be twisted. That comment did not land the way she wanted. People heard it. She left again, this time not shouting, but crying loudly enough for the performance to still register. The lobby cameras captured everything. Later that day, Sabine called me again. This time she was not nervous. She was angry. She told me Marina had tried to pressure her into backing a new version of events, one that contradicted what Sabine herself had already told others. Marina wanted Sabine to say she had witnessed threatening behavior that never happened. Sabine refused. Marina accused her of betrayal. That ended their friendship in real time. Victor finally resurfaced that evening, but not to Marina. He contacted a mutual acquaintance and asked what people were saying about him. The answer was not reassuring. His absence had become part of the story. Silence reads as guilt when everyone else is still talking. He reached out to Marina once, according to someone who saw the messages, and whatever she said convinced him to disappear completely. He blocked her everywhere. That abandonment hit Marina harder than anything I had done. The person she had risked everything for had chosen distance over loyalty. The next escalation came from authority. Marina's complaint, the one that never gained traction, was reviewed again because she kept adding details. Each new addition conflicted with the last. Timelines shifted. Locations changed. Her description of my behavior escalated from verbal to physical without explanation. That triggered scrutiny instead of sympathy. She was asked to clarify. She could not do it without rewriting previous statements. When she realized the narrative was no longer working, she tried a different approach. She showed up at my workplace. This time, she was calm. Too calm. She asked to speak privately, claiming she wanted to de-escalate. I refused to meet alone and requested a neutral presence. She agreed, confident she could still steer the conversation. She started by saying she wanted peace, that things had gone too far, that misunderstandings had spiraled. When asked directly why her stories kept changing, she blamed stress, trauma, shock. Then she contradicted herself again. She mentioned an incident she had previously claimed never happened. Someone in the room noticed immediately and asked her to explain the discrepancy. Marina froze for just a second. That pause was visible. It was enough. After that meeting, people stopped treating her claims as dangerous. They started treating them as unreliable. That distinction mattered. It stripped her of urgency. Without urgency, outrage loses fuel. Marina began unraveling socially. Invitations stopped. Messages went unanswered. People did not confront her. They simply stepped back. Isolation is quieter than punishment, but it lasts longer. She tried to regain control by reaching out to my family, hoping to reframe herself as someone who had been wronged. My family listened politely and then asked questions she could not answer without contradicting herself again. Her parents withdrew support shortly after, not because of the affair, but because of what she did after being caught. They told her to stop calling until she was ready to be honest without conditions. That conversation broke something in her that rage could not fix. The final fracture came when Marina attempted one last public accusation. She posted a long message online, vague but pointed, implying abuse, manipulation, and danger without naming specifics. People who had already heard multiple versions began comparing notes openly. Comments appeared asking for clarification. Someone referenced the police visit. Someone else mentioned the lobby incident. The post stopped gaining sympathy and started attracting questions. Marina deleted it within hours. By then, the damage was irreversible. Victor was gone. Sabine was done. Her workplace had distanced itself quietly. Her social circle no longer trusted her accounts. Authority had documented inconsistencies. Even strangers now recognized her name as someone whose story shifted depending on the audience. I did nothing during this phase except refuse to engage emotionally. Every attempt Marina made to escalate only widened the gap between what she claimed and what people had already seen with their own eyes. That was the part she never understood. I did not need to destroy her. I only needed to stop absorbing the impact of her lies. Once that happened, gravity did the rest. Marina did not disappear after everything collapsed. People rarely do. She lingered on the edges of conversations, showing up where she was no longer welcome, trying to reinsert herself into spaces that had quietly closed. That phase lasted longer than she expected and shorter than she hoped. Consequences do not arrive all at once. They arrive in layers, each one thinner than the last, until there is nothing left to push against. The first consequence was procedural. After weeks of inconsistent claims, Marina was formally informed that her complaint would not move forward. The reason was not framed as punishment, but the effect was the same. She was told that further contradictory statements could expose her to repercussions. The warning landed hard. Authority had stopped being a tool and started becoming a risk. She withdrew immediately, leaving behind a paper trail that would not vanish just because she wanted it to. The second consequence was reputational. Marina's workplace never confronted her directly. They did not need to. She was removed from collaborative projects and excluded from meetings that required trust. Conversations shortened. Feedback became impersonal. She interpreted this as cruelty, but it was simply distance. Organizations do not punish loudly when they can isolate quietly. Within weeks, she was no longer considered reliable. Her exit came later, framed as mutual, but everyone understood the sequence that led there. Victor never resurfaced. His disappearance was not dramatic. He did not defend himself or deny anything publicly. He chose erasure. That choice spoke louder than loyalty ever could. Marina tried to contact him repeatedly, escalating from anger to pleading to threats. None of it worked. He had already decided she was no longer worth the attention. The man she risked everything for did not even stay long enough to be blamed. Sabine avoided Marina entirely. Their friendship did not end in a fight or reconciliation. It ended in silence. Sabine did not block Marina or insult her. She simply stopped responding. That kind of ending leaves no opening for revision. It signals finality without spectacle. Marina attempted to paint this as betrayal, but no one echoed the claim. People who have been pressured to lie do not rush to defend the person who tried to use them. The third consequence was social memory. Marina discovered that stories stick even when people stop talking about them. Invitations dried up. Introductions came with pauses. New connections asked subtle questions that revealed old information had followed her. She learned that being known for what you did after being caught carries more weight than the original act itself. Affairs are common. Attempts to rewrite reality are not forgiven as easily. My involvement ended gradually. I stopped being a topic once Marina stopped being believed. That transition mattered. It meant I was no longer positioned as her opponent. I became irrelevant to her story, which was the one outcome she could not manipulate. People stopped asking me for updates. They stopped checking in. They assumed the situation had resolved because, in every meaningful way, it had. I moved apartments. Not to escape anything, but to close a chapter cleanly. The new place had no shared history, no echoes of raised voices or twisted sheets. I took only what belonged to me and left the rest behind without ceremony. Closure did not require a final conversation. It required separation without return. Marina attempted contact one last time. It was not dramatic or apologetic. It was transactional. She suggested we could both move on if we agreed to stop referencing each other. The suggestion revealed her misunderstanding of what had happened. I had already moved on because I no longer needed to reference her at all. I did not respond. Silence answered more clearly than engagement ever could. The long-term consequence for Marina was not isolation, but recalibration. She was forced to rebuild without shortcuts, without borrowed credibility, without controlling the narrative in advance. People who once accepted her versions automatically now asked follow-up questions. She had to choose between honesty and exhaustion. That choice repeated daily. Some days she chose honesty. Other days she withdrew entirely. For me, the consequence was clarity. I learned how quickly a life can fracture and how important it is to move decisively when it does. I learned that confrontation, when done immediately and openly, prevents lies from gaining traction. I learned that refusing to play defense changes the shape of conflict entirely. Most of all, I learned that walking away without triumph is still a win. The sentence Marina spoke in that bedroom did not just end an engagement. It exposed how she handled accountability, how she treated truth, and how she reacted when control slipped. Everything that followed flowed from that moment. No investigation was needed. No elaborate plan was required. The outcome was determined by the speed at which she tried to escape responsibility and the number of people she dragged into that attempt. By the time the dust settled, there was no villain and no hero in the public sense. There were only patterns and outcomes. Marina lived with hers. I lived beyond mine. That is how it ended.